So today what we're going to be doing is we are just going to be looking at an introduction into what the Unit 2 Outcome 3 assessment is going to be like. So we're going to go through basically what's the timeline kind of going to look like for us in the next few weeks, as well as some sample posters of what we kind of expect you guys to do. So what the end product will kind of look like, as well as kind of a quick overview of what needs to be included in each section. Now, obviously, even though we're giving you this PowerPoint and stuff, and you can refer back to this PowerPoint at any time while you're doing the assessment, or while you're planning, I would say, we are also going to give you a criteria sheet for the final write-up, or for the final type-up, we could say, of the actual research poster, which obviously at this point looks like we'll be most likely doing that online. Okay, so just to give you an idea, the Outcome 3 SAC is an application style SAC. What this means is it's very different from the usual kind of like test style SACs that we do, you know, with multiple choice and short answer questions kind of stuff. So it's a bit different because it's application style, which means that we're going to be doing a small in-class experiment. We're going to be collecting data for that. And then we are going to be analyzing that data. And we're going to basically be doing up a whole research kind of poster out of that. Okay, and so that SAC, or this SAC, is different from the other SACs you've done, because in other SACs we usually finish the other SAC within one single period, within 50 minutes. Within 50 minutes it's done. This SAC actually goes on for about a total of 2 to 3 weeks there, and it follows the same process. So even next year when you do this SAC, it's going to be the same kind of process. We give you an extended period of time to work on it, and then give you a double period at the end to do the final write-up there. Okay, so that's the basic idea when we're looking at this SAC. And across any of the VC sciences that you're doing, it's more or less going to be the same. So essentially, starting from this Thursday, you're going to have a period of 2 weeks allocated to planning. Okay, what that means is that you're going to be working on a logbook, and this year the logbook will be done online, similar to how the Year 12s did it this year. The logbook will be online. Okay, and it's literally just going to be on EP. You're just going to be typing in your draft or rough copy. And then on the actual day when you actually do the final copy, it's simply just a matter of kind of copy paste. Okay, copy paste, but obviously proofreading, making sure you're not making any grammatical errors and that kind of stuff. So with the logbook, you're just going to be drafting up responses to the different sections. So for example, in the logbook, you might have a section that says introduction. And under that introduction, we'll have included separate subheadings as questions. Okay, and all of those subheadings would be forming the different criteria of the criteria sheet. So then all you do is you just type up your answers underneath that. And when it comes to putting it on the poster, you just copy paste all the bits of that intro and kind of structure it and format it into your poster. So it's more or less whatever's on your logbook is going to be on your poster. And that's why we say that your poster or your final copy of your SAC can only really be as good as your logbook. If you waste time during the planning and you don't do a proper logbook, or you don't, for example, take it seriously, then your poster, you're not going to magically be able to just, like get a good poster out of thin air. It's all based on your logbook. The logbook is done under timed conditions. What that means is that we keep it open, but after every planning session, we close that up and we change the access code. So what that technically means is you're not allowed to work on this at home. We can't give this to you as a homework task. We can't say, oh, you know, you can continue your logbook in the evening. We can't allow that because it's a SAC. And as the name SAC stands for, it's school assessed coursework. So it has to be done in school kind of timing, which is funny when we're learning from home, but yeah, you kind of get the idea there. So the logbook will have a timed component to it. Obviously, that's going to be over a number of days. So it's not going to be like 50 minutes or 100 minutes. But yeah, there will be a time when everyone will have to stop working on the logbook. And I will keep reminding you guys about the time limit and stuff like that as we go through it. Okay, what else did I want to say? You're free to use any resources during planning. So you can use the internet, you can use your textbook, you can use my PowerPoints, you can refer back to the criteria sheet, which we will give to you as well. Make sure your logbook is done properly, okay? A good logbook means a good poster. If you don't do your logbook well, then it's not going to be, you're not going to be able to just have a good poster there. So on the SAC day, which I will specify what date that is, I need to double check because I know in 3 weeks from now, some of you are doing unit 3 and 4 subjects. And so you may have exams. I don't want to run the outcome 3 SAC for this on that same week. So probably look, I'm just taking a guess, probably week 5 or week 6. I'll give you a specific date though. I just need to cross check. Okay. But that will be one double period. So it could be periods 1 and 2. It could be periods 3 and 4 if it's on a Monday for us. Could be periods 5 and 6 if it's on a Thursday. We'll be in a double period to transfer the contents over. And I will give you guys a pre-prepared PowerPoint template that basically is what we always use for the scientific poster. And all you're going to do is copy paste all your information onto it. But when I say copy paste, I don't mean just take the whole lot and just dump it on, but you've got to kind of like, you've got to copy paste it and still make sure that the formatting is there, the structure is there. For example, sometimes in the poster SACs, students will copy paste all the information and one section will be like a size 12 font and the other section will be like size 20. And it's like there's a formatting issue there and it doesn't look good. So as you're doing your poster up, imagine you were to be printing out this poster and presenting it to someone and how presentable you would want it to look. Okay, and the final thing is that you are basically going to be uploading the final copy of that poster onto due work there. Okay, and due work is literally just through Schoolbox, and then we'll just mark that like a SAC. How do you write a logbook? There's not really a how to it. It's just a matter of answering the question. So we will give you a logbook that already has pre-prepared questions in it. And then all you're doing is you're answering those questions with reference to the experiment that we've done. So that you're not going to create that from scratch. We're going to give that to you. Okay. All right. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the process of the outcome 3 poster, because trust me, it is a process. It is a daunting, time-consuming process running this SAC each year, but it's something that we have to do. It's supposed to teach you those key science skills, and it's supposed to give you an idea of what university is going to be like, guys, because look, regardless of what course you do, more or less in one form or the other, you will be asked to do a scientific poster at some part of your life, of your university life. And I think this VCE one really prepares you for things like how to write referencing, how to write references, how to formulate and synthesize your information into a poster format. So it's a good preparation for that. Is the pre-prepared PowerPoint template going to be on EP? Good question. No. So with the pre-prepared PowerPoint template, because we don't want students working on or transferring content to that pre-prepared PowerPoint template before the actual SAC day, we will not give you access to the pre-prepared PowerPoint template until the day of the actual SAC. That's just to make sure that some people are not like, working on it in advance, or that some people are not, being unfairly disadvantaged or disadvantaged there. Okay, so you'll only get the pre-prepared PowerPoint template on the day of the actual SAC. Before that, you'll only have access to the logbook. As I said, though, guys, the logbook basically mirrors the actual assessment. So everything that's in your logbook will essentially be going into your pre-prepared PowerPoint template on the actual SAC day. So just do your logbook well, and you can expect that you'll do well on your poster too. And this is if you do it well enough and you follow the criteria sheet to a T, there's really no way you can't do well on this SAC. Look, it's really rare for students to fail on this SAC, if that makes sense. They generally tend to do well in this SAC. Even though I know it's research methods and it's like, oh my God, this is going to be an automatic difficult task. It's not actually as difficult as it might seem. So yeah. All right, so I'll just move on to the next slide. Now, this is a general layout. I've taken this from your textbook, and in fact, your textbook has a really good chapter towards the end of the textbook on this whole outcome 3. So have a look through that if you haven't already. This is what your general poster will look like. So it'll have a title. Okay, you'll have an introduction. You'll have your methodology, also known as method. Okay, and then you'll have your results. Now, we are going to be collecting data and turning that into a graph. I'll talk a little bit more about that soon. Then you'll have a discussion section, and you've got a conclusion. Usually the conclusion is embedded within the discussion section. If you want to make it a separate thing, you can, but on our template, it's just included within the discussion. And then the last section will be our references section. Okay, we don't really care about acknowledgements too much, so we can just cut that out. It's just your referencing there. So just a few things to note here. Each of these sections seems to have a word limit attached to it. However, those word limits are just a suggested guide. You can go over a little, that's not an issue. Look, we're not going to be counting words, to be quite honest, but if it looks like it's too little or looks like it's not enough, that's more of an issue. It's more of an issue if you're 2 under compared to 2 over. Okay, the reason that we say that is that when you're 2 under the word count, it might mean that you don't have enough detail in your answer there, or enough detail under each of those sections. If you're in doubt about any of the sections or what you need to include, during the planning time, you're obviously allowed to ask your teacher. During the actual SAC day, though, that's just like a normal SAC. Your teacher can't really help you as much. Okay, and like I said before, when you're doing your poster, do it in a way that as though you are going to present it, okay, as though you are going to sit in front of the whole psychology cohort and all the psychology teachers and put that on a big screen or on a big billboard and present that. Okay, how would you want that to look? You would never present something where you've got 6 different font sizes happening, right? You would want it to look nice. You would want to have some visual presentation there. You can choose to put images in. Sometimes students put images in their research poster that are relevant to what is being studied. For example, if it's a study about memory, they might put a picture that relates to something about memory. Okay, so it's up to you. That's just up to you how you want it to look nice, how you want it to look presentable. Even at university level, when you do research posters like this, they do mark you on things like presentability, on things like formatting, on things like grammar. These are all important things. And the reason I'm really stressing on these 4 points is that these are the actual places where students lose marks. Okay, and they don't realize that it will cost them marks, but it might be the difference between them getting a 90 and, you know, between them getting a 90 and them getting like, I don't know, a 80. Okay, it could be the difference between those 2 marks there, because these do add up. So just keep that in mind when you're working on your poster. And obviously, look, when you're in your planning component or planning kind of planning aspect of your research poster in these next 2 weeks, you're allowed to collect and collate any information, any images or any extra visual components to add into your poster. You don't have to wait until the last minute to do that. You can obviously gather those resources up and then include them in your poster on the actual SAC day. Okay, moving on. So now we're going to look at each of the sections of the research poster. Okay, the first one is called the title. The title is kind of related to the research question, but it's not in the form of a question. Okay, now I'm going to talk about this because I know that this can be different across the VCE sciences. For example, if you're going to be doing if you are doing, or next year, if you're planning to do VCE chemistry, I know that in chemistry, it tends to be a research question sometimes. So in psychology, though, it generally tends to be in the form of a statement, okay, rather than a question. So like the effect of IV on DV, that's the general kind of formula. So you can see here the effect of leading questions on the reconstruction of memory of a textual passage. So in this case, the leading questions are the IV, and the reconstruction of memory, or how frequently someone would reconstruct their memory, is the DV. Okay, this is a Unit 3 topic, which probably doesn't make a lot of sense. Let's look at one that we have done. So the tendency to agree, an investigation on conformity in high school students. Okay, so what we're looking at here is basically the relationship between how frequently someone agrees and then the kind of rate of conformity that we see there. Okay, so generally there are a wide range of ways in which you can write down a title. Although we say the title should be a maximum of 12 words, again, even if it goes up to 15, it's okay, but longer than that is not going to be looking very good. Okay, a title of a poster should be succinct, it should be concise, it shouldn't be like a mini essay there or like a whole new sentence. Okay, it should just be a title. Now the title needs to clearly indicate what you're investigating. By reading your title, I should have an idea of what your study is about. For example, by reading this title, I know that this study is about conformity. By reading this title, I know that this study is about the reconstruction of memory. Okay, so you need to be able to clearly indicate what you're investigating. If you're talking about the effect of authority figures, okay, if you're talking about the effect of an authority figure on obedience, you could say the impact of an authority figure on VCE students' level of obedience. So if we were to write that title, BCE psychology students. Okay, you can see that that title clearly indicates an IV. Okay, that is our authority figure, the presence of an authority figure, and the DV, which is the level of obedience that is shown. So that is a clear title. By reading that, I can clearly see what that study is going to be about. Okay, you can include commas in your title. You can include colons in your title. You can include double quotation marks in your title. Okay, that's more so if your participants are that's more so if your participants are have said something in your study and you want to quote them in your title, which probably won't be the case in our example. These are some general examples, guys, of titles that you might come across in relating to different studies. So if I'm doing a study on the effect of sleep deprivation and short-term memory, that's my title, the effect of sleep deprivation on short-term memory. Okay, this double quotation mark, like I said, usually if somebody says something in a study and you want to quote that in your title, that's where you would include this. So let's say I did a study of the impact of color on the perception of flavor. And one of the little girls in my study who was given a red lollipop made a comment like, oh, I think it's strawberry because it's red. Okay, that would then be something that I might quote in my title, but that's not something that will be very relevant to us. Okay, so don't stress too much about that. The impact of meditation on anxiety levels in post-traumatic stress patients, that's another example. Again, a clear IV and a clear thing that we're measuring for change, or a DV. The effect of reward, IV, on helping behavior, DV, in children. We obviously, when we do our study, we are going to have a quick discussion of what the IV, DV is and make sure we're all on the same page. But very important for you to remember that you need to include the IV and DV in your title. Okay, it doesn't matter about the direction of effect. You don't need to say how reward increases helping behavior. You don't need to include words like increasing, decreasing here. It's just a generally worded title that indicates the IV and the DV. That's about it. Okay, so that is our title. And our title is usually worth 1 to 2 marks there. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Okay, let me move on to the next section. The next section is the introduction. Now, the introduction is one of the 2 more meatier sections of your research poster. Okay, introduction and discussion make up the bulk of the marks. Bulk of the marks, but more so I would say they require more detail. And this is why students tend to lose marks in these sections, because they don't give enough detail. Your introduction should not be vague. Okay, it should not be general. It shouldn't be general the whole way through. Where it can be general is you can start off generally. Okay, so if I'm doing a study about memory, I can start off with a sentence like, memory is a very important faculty that is essential for us to recall our life's experiences. That's literally, it doesn't give me any specific information about what my study about memory is about, but it gives me a general overview of the subject. Okay, so if we're doing a study about social psychology, you can obviously bring in any relevant concepts that you think are any relevant or kind of general introductory overviews that are relevant to social psychology. So you could say something like, oh, people, it is inevitable that people make judgments of others based on their physical appearance, or something like that. Okay, so that's the general overview. And you can see that this kind of looks like a funnel. Okay, it starts off very broad and very general in the opening sentence. And as you go further and further into your introduction, it becomes more and more specific. It starts to get a little more narrow. Okay, so then you start defining any keywords or any ideas. For example, if we were doing a study on conformity, you might define what conformity is. You might define, the influences on conformity, like a normative influence or an informational influence. Okay, so then you talk about your thesis. The thesis is literally just the hypothesis. So we always include the hypothesis in the introduction. And we also state the IV and DV separately from that as well. And then you outline your main points. Outline your main points means you're going to be linking back to past literature and stuff like that. Okay, so again, you can see that they've given another example here with reference to taste perception. So with an introduction to a study that you've done about taste perception, you might first start off defining, okay, taste perception, okay? You might give a general introductory sentence, a general overview, okay? That might be the first line that you include. You might say, different people taste things differently or have different experiences of taste. Okay, there are many factors that influence this. And then you go on to start, bringing up your topic, whether it's color intensity, whether you're talking about perceptual set on it, taste perception, whatever you're talking about, you slowly start to go from being broad to becoming more specific there. Then you start to bring in past literature. Past literature means you're going to go on the internet and find some past journal articles or some past research studies that you can include, okay? And Google Scholar is a really good place to start for this. And this is where, like when I was in uni, I used to find all my journal articles from Google Scholar. I'll show you guys how to use this. It's really easy. And it actually does your referencing for you. So that will save you some time as well. I'll show you guys how to do that during the planning component. Anyway, you also need to define any psych-related key terms. So if with reference to taste perception, you might define terms like what do we mean by color intensity? What do we mean by perceptual set? What do we mean by texture? What do we mean by flavor? So these are all terms that are related to taste perception, and they're all terms that I might include or discuss in my introduction. Okay, you need to include your general aim of the study, and you also need to include the operationalized hypothesis. Now, your criteria sheet will have a checklist of everything that you will need to include. So you don't need to memorize all of this. Okay, this will all be included in your criteria sheet there. And remember, it's also important for you to discuss, when we're talking about the introduction, you also need to be able to discuss, what's it called? You also need to be able to kind of explain all these variables that are involved. Okay, now, we're not going to be doing a study on taste perception, okay? So obviously I wouldn't just give you all the examples and all the answers there. Our study will be on social psychology. So I'm not going to go into any more information about that so as to not ruin the experiment or ruin the questionnaire that you'll be doing tomorrow. But yeah, just to give you a broad idea. Okay. Another question, if we went into lockdown, would we have to do this as an oral? No. So this SAC is never done as an oral presentation. It's always just it's always just submitted as a research poster. You don't have to present it though. In university though, you will have to present it, but in VCE, we don't have to. So regardless of whether we go back into lockdown or never go back to school, we will actually not ever have to do this as an oral. So don't stress about that. Okay. All right, let's keep moving on. So if you have any questions about any of the sections as we're going through, just please let me know. I know this can be a little bit confusing. Okay, the method. Now, the method section is actually one of the sections that's very, very easy to get marks and very hard to lose marks, because more or less, because we're doing this as a class experiment, we're all going to have the same kind of information regarding things like how many participants were involved. Okay, it'll basically be the number of students from our class and from the other class. So we'll have that specific number, then everyone will have the same number. When we figure out the age ranges of everyone that took place, so students aged between, I don't know, 15 to 16 or 15 to 17, whatever the ages are, we'll have that age range there and everyone will have the same answer there. In terms of where did they come from, we know that all of these students will be Altaqua College students, okay? So they will be basically involved. How many were male or female? So we'll have that gender breakup for you guys, and how will they be selected? I think we already know what kind of sampling is going to be used for this study, so I don't have to explain that, okay? We're just using, me and Mr. Caesar are just using the students that are literally in front of us, the students that are easiest for us to access, okay? So mention all the materials or things. Materials section is mentioning everything that you've used to run the study. So this could include a list of questions, a laptop, an answer sheet, anything that we've used in the study. And procedure is the step-by-step directions of what we did to conduct or carry out the study. The procedure should be detailed enough that someone else is able to look at your procedure and redo the study. That's how detailed it should be. Okay, when you do your method section, these 3 subheadings must be included in your poster. And these two, the materials and the procedure, can be done in kind of dot points. So the materials can be done in dot points. So you can be like laptop, okay, they can be written in dot points. And the procedure can be done in numbered steps, like number 1, number 2, number 3, like that, okay? But the participants has to be written as a single paragraph. So that section there, the first section, has to be written as a proper paragraph. In fact, almost all the sections and all the parts of your research report should be written as a should be written as like sentences or paragraphs rather than dot points, okay? Because that is the format that's required. So in other words, if we look at this picture here, guys, the method section basically tells us who, what, and how, okay? Who was involved in the study? That's our participants. What did we do? Or no, sorry, not what did we do? What did we need to conduct the study? That's our materials. And how did we conduct the study is the procedure. That's the step-by-step breakdown of how we carried out the study. Okay, so remember, method is the who, the what, and the how of the study. Okay, let me just go to the next one. Oh, another question. When we start our planning, will we still be able to access? Yes, of course. So even though you're doing it on EP, we're not going to enable full screen monitoring for the logbook because obviously we know you're going to be switching between tabs. So if you leave your tab, we're not going to get a notification like, oh, this person has, you know, been out of full screen mode. It's because remember, the logbook is not marked. So anything you do in your planning time, it's not like in strict SAC conditions as the last double period will be. The last double period where you're actually transferring content from the logbook to the thing, that will be the kind of strict SAC conditions. But before that, it's more or less the planning component. So like I said, you can access any PowerPoints or any resources, any online research articles, anything like that is allowed. Okay, moving on to the next section, which is the results section. And in this section, as I explained this section, I'll also talk about what our how we're going to be collecting these results. So tomorrow in the single period, we're going to be giving you guys a link to a questionnaire. Remember, questionnaire is one of our types of research methodologies that we can use to collect data, and it is a type of self-report. So you can think about that and the limitations of that already. We're going to be giving you guys a link to a questionnaire. And I'm only going to tell you that it's related to social psychology. It's related to social cognition. Okay, I'm not going to give you more information than that because I don't want to influence our results too much or put expectations on you guys. For the purpose of this study, you guys are the participants, and basically me and Mr. Caesar are the experimenters because we're administering that test to you and we're collecting that data. Okay, but in terms of our experimental role, it kind of stops there. After we've gotten the data, we're going to look at that, combine that for you and give it back to you, and then you're going to have to analyze that and write up your research poster from there. Okay, so more or less, it will be, I think it will be an interesting topic to see what the results will be like. So it's something I think all of you will find some fascination with. It's not like a boring topic, hopefully. Anyway, with your results section in your paper, the results section will always include data. Sometimes this is in the form of a table, but almost always we include a graph. Usually at this level, we expect you to draw like a bar graph. Okay, not draw, but use some kind of program like Microsoft Excel or something to create a bar graph. Okay, using that raw data. Your x-axis, now when you've got your bar graph, it needs to have a clear labeling of what the x-axis is and what the y-axis is, as you would do in any graph that you draw up. And your table and graphs that you include in the results section must be captioned. So let's say you've included both a graph and a table. You would then basically need to label them as figure 1 or figure 2 or table 1, table 2, graph 1, graph 2, some kind of label that shows what that particular data is showing us. So you could write mean self-rated scores of color intensity of food. Or here it says figure 2 shows a graph that represents information found in figure 1. Okay, figure 1's not included here, but yeah, you get the idea. You also need to describe the results briefly. So here's a good example of, I'll just put a bracket around it. This is a good example of a description of results. Literally, when you're describing the results, just pretend you're describing it to someone who's like, I don't know math. Okay, they're just like, I don't know how to read a graph. Explain it to me in words. So that's basically what you're doing. You're taking that data and you're just describing that data to them in simple words. You're not doing any extra statistical analysis. You're not getting into some complex comparisons here. You're just describing the data as it is and as what it looks like on that particular graph there. Okay, so that's the basic idea in the results section. And the results section is also an easy way to get marks as long as you've done your data correctly and done your graph correctly. Okay, Then we're looking at the discussion section. So as I mentioned before with the introduction section, that was one of the kind of more detailed sections, and the discussion is also one of your other detailed sections of your research poster. In the discussion section, just as this picture, just as the guy in this picture is doing here, you're kind of taking a magnifying glass to your research or to whatever research you participated in, to the experiment that we're going to do, and you're looking at it with a very keen eye. You're critiquing and you're evaluating that particular experiment or that study. So you're looking at the limitations of that study. You're looking at the weaknesses of the study. So from tomorrow itself, when I administer the test and I introduce you guys to that questionnaire, I want you guys to really have a very keen eye, have a very kind of critiquing analysis kind of happening. Every single part of that experiment or every single part of that setup, even from today, for example, you might think about, okay, if Miss Rubin's going to make us do a questionnaire, what are the disadvantages of that? What are the general limitations of a self-report? Because all of these kind of evaluations or limitations or weaknesses or flaws that you pick up in the study need to be addressed in your discussion section. And trust me, we have designed this in a way that hopefully you guys can pick out at least a few flaws there. I say the more you can talk about, the better it is. Okay, the more you can talk about. It's always better to be more detailed than less detailed. In the discussion section, you're also going to talk about the conclusion of the study. And that's basically whether our results supported or did not support our hypothesis, as well as whether the results can be generalized back to the population. And we know that there are different factors that can influence a generalization of results. Okay. We also need to then link back to any of the studies that we talked about in the introduction and discuss whether our results were consistent with those studies or whether our results kind of were different from those studies. Okay, so that's another part of the discussion that you'll include. In terms of other limitations, think about whether me and Mr. Caesar have violated any ethical breaches or violations there. Think about all your rights as participants and whether we've fulfilled them. Okay, think about any extraneous variables that take place. So while you're doing your questionnaire tomorrow, think about whether there are any outside variables that could influence how students respond to that, how one student might have a different response from another student, or how things might not go the way that we would have planned as experimenters. Think about any other potential confounding variables that might have taken place, as well as any general issues with the experiment. Remember, you don't always have to put a clear name to every single limitation. You might think of a limitation, but you might not want to include it because you don't know what it's called. It doesn't matter, just describe it. It'll still be showing that you know how to analyze those results. Okay. Also, one thing that a lot of students forget to do is they talk about all the flaws. They're like, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, which is good, but they don't talk about the suggestions for future research. So if you say, okay, this experiment is bad or this experiment is flawed because it uses convenient sampling, well, give a suggestion for future research. You can say, okay, well, maybe in the future we can use random sampling to make the sample more representative. Okay, so you can suggest. So yes, explain what's wrong about the study, but also explain how we can fix it for the future. Okay, that's the basic idea. And again, all these criteria will be included in the criteria sheet that we'll give you. Okay, so that's the discussion section. And the last section of your report, which is barely a section, but it is something that you will be marked on, is references. Now, your references are not a big detailed section, but basically they are a kind of record or a citation list of all the different resources that you've used. Okay, most of you will be using probably the PowerPoints, but don't really reference the PowerPoints, okay, because the PowerPoints are not an actual published resource. Okay, they're just something that we make. So reference your textbooks, whatever you use from the PowerPoint, whether it's a definition, whether it's something about research methods, just reference your Ed Rollo textbook, and we'll give you the reference for this. And I think the reference for this is also in your book itself. Okay, we'll give you the reference for that anyway. Journal articles that you use, any websites that you use, make sure that you keep an ongoing reference list of everything that you use, because it's easier to do that compared to thinking about, oh, where did I get this information from, like 2 weeks down the line. So it's better that you keep a Word document with all the different references that you collect. References are similar to bibliography. So a lot of you might remember whenever you've had a project in lower year levels, you're asked to do a bibliography. Okay, bibliography is similar, but remember with a reference list, it's got to be formatted to APA standards. APA stands for the American Psychological Association. And in psychology, we tend to do our formatting according to the APA standards there. Okay, what that means is that generally there's a specific structure. Now, you don't need to stress too much about learning the structure point to point, okay, or to a T, simply because a lot of websites nowadays, including Google Scholar, as I mentioned before, do the referencing automatically for you. They automatically generate a reference for you that's already APA kind of formatted, okay? And this will save you a lot of time. So I'll show you guys how to do this so that you can save some time there, okay? Because doing a reference like this from scratch, especially just starting off like how you guys are now, it's going to be really difficult for you. Look, even in university, I literally relied on Google Scholar to do references like this for me. So it's something that you can use in university too. No one's checking there. And yeah, everyone uses automatic citation referencing nowadays. All right, so that's the basic idea. So you've got two types of references. You've got the ones that you put right at the end of your poster, which is in your big reference list. That's the one most of you are familiar with. You've also got another type of reference called the in-text reference. In-text reference means that whenever you talk about something, so you describe a study in your introduction and you describe a sentence from that person's study, you might not quote it directly, but even if you're paraphrasing it, you do have to reference that person. You need to acknowledge them because it was Denson and Lincoln who did that study, for example. It wasn't you. So you need to give them the credit where the credit is due. So basically that means that you just take their names and you put a comma and you write the year in which their study was published. Okay, and that's an in-text reference because rather than putting it at the end of your reference list, you are actually also putting it within your sentence. You're not going to have many in-text references, probably only one or two in the introduction. And maybe one in the discussion. Okay, and that will be based on the study that you choose to discuss. Okay, whatever in-text reference is here, if it says Denson and Lincoln 2011, I need to be able to go back to your reference list at the end and also see that reflected there. Okay, obviously it's not reflected here, but I need to see a reference link, something like, I have to put it here for alphabetical order. I need to see something like, okay, Denson, and then I don't even know the abbreviation, okay, and Lincoln. I need to see that reflected there. If I don't, then I would have to write something like, okay, reference missing, and you'd be deducted marks for that. Okay, that's the basic idea. So I can help you guys out with the in-text referencing, but yeah. Okay, in terms of in-text references, you have to do in-text references both you'd have to do in-text references within the actual paragraph of your introduction, as well as at the end of the list. So it's not really a this or that, it's more of a this and that. They're both required. Yeah. Basically, whatever's an in-text reference needs to be reflected in the full reference list as well, and vice versa. Okay, let's see. Will the actual SAC be full screen on EP? And if yes, will a logbook be in that EP? I hope that made sense. Your SAC is not going to be done on EP. It's going to be done on a PowerPoint slide. So for that reason, for that reason, you'll be working on your SAC on a PowerPoint slide. So I can't really monitor that as such. But you'll only be given the double period to do it. So I expect that you'll be going back and forth between the EP logbook and your PowerPoint slide. So I guess your actual SAC won't really be full screen, if that makes sense, because it's not going to be done on EP. It's going to be done on the PowerPoint. Yeah. Okay. I think that was about it. Let me just check one more thing, guys, before we finish off for today. And these are just some examples of referencing to give you an idea of what that looks like. Some examples of the full reference and then the in-text reference. Okay, I know the in-text references are hard, and depending on whether you place it at the end of a sentence or whether you place it at the start of the sentence, the formatting can change a bit, as you can see here. Okay, I can help you with this if you need some extra support there. Okay, just to look at some sample scientific posters, just remembering that the sample posters that are on these next two slides are not are not like, oh, this is how you have to do it. It's more of a suggestion as to what the end product's going to look like, just to give you an idea, okay, or an overview. Always work according to the criteria that you are given in your rubric or in your criteria sheet that we give you. And if you're in doubt about any of those criteria, sections, or aspects, you can always ask us during that planning component there. So these are some sample ones. These are both taken from, well, one of them is taken from your Edrolo book. That's this one. I think it's on page 456, if I'm not mistaken. So you can have a look at the full-size version. This is taken from the Unit 3 Edrolo book, which most of you would not have. So you can still have a look at that in terms of just looking at the general overview. You can still see that it's got an introduction, it's got a method, got the results, got the discussion, got a conclusion, and got some references. Okay, it's always the same kind of structure there. Here we've got an introduction, we've got a method, and you can see that method is divided into those 3 subheadings: participants, materials, and procedure. You've got your results, you've got your discussion, you've got your conclusion, and you've got your references. Okay, it's more or less the same structure. So I'll let you guys anyway use the next offline session to kind of read through these as much as you can. And also read through the outcome 3 section in your textbook as well. That's really helpful as well. So those are just 2 examples of what it looks like, or, you know, and this is an example of how you can include an image, you know, to make your thing look a little bit more visually appealing, if you like. Okay, so that's the basic idea. And there's another 2. I've included the full screen version of this one. Let me point to it, this one, on the school box. So on the class page under files, you can open this up in a full screen PowerPoint and you can look through this. And again, this one is from the Unit 3 book. So you can still have a read through that as well. Okay, so these are just 4 examples of research posters that are good examples, or examples of, you know, what we would like to see. If you can go beyond that and exceed in terms of detail or in terms of, you know, visual presentation, that's amazing. But remember, we don't want you to waste like a lot of time picking images and stuff like that. It doesn't have to be that every paragraph needs to be accompanied by an image. It just has to be that it looks visually presentable. That doesn't mean you have to start, you know, employing, you know, all your creativity skills on your poster, because obviously we have to balance out and make sure we are balancing out our time there and not spending too much time on one criteria at the expense of another. Okay, so I think that basically covers outcome 3, the assessment and the introduction into what it is. So I'm just going to stop the recording here.